This is Alex, and welcome to Barely Braided, where we're taking a deep dive into foster care, adoption, and all things parenting, even the sticky stuff. Welcome. It is episode 35. It's finally springtime. It's getting nice outside. It's been a little rainy. I'm not complaining. It's Friday, at least for me. It might not be Friday for all of you right now, but today is a good day. I can just feel it. Our guest today is Natalie Chavis Fisher. She's a best-selling author, a third-generation attorney, and the executive producer for the documentary called Foster Care, Imperfection. Her list of accolades is extremely extensive, but instead of me just reading through the list, I would rather hear from her directly. I'm sure you would agree. Hey, Natalie, welcome.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for having me.
I'm so good. I'm so glad that you're here. When you sent me the intro with, some bullet points about yourself and your background, how could somebody not be impressed?
Oh, you are too kind, far too kind. I just try and work in the areas that I love.
That's so amazing. I know we're going to have quite a lot to talk about. You are an expert in so many different places. You've done so many different things. So I'm excited to hear all about it. First of all, though, where are you located?
So my practice is in Indianapolis, Indiana, and I was born and raised in Indiana. So that's been the majority of my experience in child welfare.
Okay. So you've lived in Indiana your whole life, is that correct?
Yeah. Born and raised, born and bred, Indiana. I bet like a couple of years here and a couple of years there, with my husband's job, we may have done a little moving, but that's definitely my base. It's always my home.
So cool. Well, I bet you probably are getting excited about the springtime too. Do you all get a bunch of snow?
You know what? It's so funny that you ask. About a week ago, we got snow, believe it or not.
No.
Yes. In April, which is just crazy. So it just depends. Certainly when I grew up, there was so much snow that you could go put your snowsuit on and have snow fights and all that good stuff. And then that sort of changed. So we are always happy to see snow because it brings back such good, memories.
Okay. Yeah, you do have a point there about the memories. I don't know. I think I'd still choose to avoid it if I had the chance.
Yeah, I hear you there. It's not always comfortable. and driving is very interesting.
Yes, it is. So you have so much experience and you've done so much with adoption and foster care. Was there anything in your life that led you to this, or what prompted you to kind of get into this world?
That's a good question. Up until about 2 or 3 years ago, I would just tell the story that when I first started practicing law, I practiced with my father, and he sort of believes in, hey, I'm going to give you some work and you sink or swim is your choice. So that's kind of... So that's how we were trained. And so he gave me 5 foster care adoption cases, and I decided I was going to swim,
Yeah.
Right. And thank you. And as I decided to swim, I absolutely fell in love with the work. I always said if I was not an attorney, I'd be a social worker for sure.
Yeah.
I just really, really love, helping people, seeing things grow and progress and heal. But then about 2 or 3 years ago, I got to really thinking more about that question. And then it dawned on me, I've been around foster care my entire life. It's so funny because my mom always says, Natalie, no matter what experience you go through, you use it all. You ultimately, as an adult, will use it all. And it makes sense. So my grandmother, my mother's side, always had some family member or neighbor living with her. And the same with my mother. And then I remembered too, my aunt was a licensed foster parent while I was growing up. So what that translates to is I had tons and still have tons of foster cousins who I just see them as my cousins, so they're at the family reunion to the day, their children are my nieces and nephews. So I just was sort of exposed early just throughout my childhood and didn't see anything different about it, quite frankly.
Yeah, it is so crazy how things that happen to you in your life do later contribute. I was thinking about this the other day when I was trying to decide what I wanted to do for the rest of my life as far as a career. I at that time I had no idea. And so I went to school for audio production because I liked music and I just had no other ideas of what type of career I wanted to get involved in. And so after I graduated, years and years went by. And of course, I never used those tools. I never used what I learned. And suddenly, 10 years later, here I am with a podcast and I'm using those skills,
There
which
you
is
go.
so weird. So your father, did he have a specialty, or was his specialty in foster care and adoption?
So he was a general and still is a general practitioner.
Okay.
And so, so he'll do a lot of criminal defense, probate, family law, wills, contracts, things of that nature. So I always like to say he was a community lawyer. So he did what the community needed him to do. And so as part of that, he ended up, and my brother worked with us as well, and he enjoys the foster care cases as well. So between the two of them, they sort of created that practice within the practice.
Interesting. I did not know that attorneys could be called general practitioners. I thought that applied to like medical professionals.
Yeah. It's the same thing, just like a family practitioner. You're absolutely correct. Absolutely.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So I need to share a secret with you.
What's that?
I don't know. I'm fairly positive I've never talked about this on the podcast, but one of my like long term bucket list goals that probably may not ever be achieved would be to become a lawyer working in the same realm that you do.
Wow, that gave me a chill. I am here to tell you, Alex, it is such rewarding work.
I love that.
Oh my God, when you can get your hands in there and really, really not only make a difference, but see the difference being made at such a high level. And then by the time we have a hearing, an adoption hearing, and it's all over, we're clapping, we're celebrating. There's a reception, there's cookies, because you're just, it's a great feeling. Yeah, it's great work. So I hope you do achieve that goal.
I do too. I have told very few people this, and you're working my dream job right now. So maybe at some point in the future, I can pick your brain about that. But so I'll tell you the struggle that I kind of ran into. So I told you about my college a little bit, and I went and got a 2-year associate's degree. And after that, I started working, and I never really had the need to further my education. Well, several months ago, I decided it was kind of on my bucket list that I at least wanted to finish my bachelor's degree. And so I started attending college online, just part-time, slowly, not really for any other reason than I wanted to finish it as a bucket list item and maybe one day work towards that ultimate final goal. And the struggle that I ran into was that if you wanted to go into any sort of realm, becoming an attorney or a lawyer, you could not attend a program online that was accredited. And this was before COVID.
Okay. That's interesting. I was not aware of that. I'm just thinking top of mind, a girlfriend of mine who started law school, or at least law school, about a year or two ago. No, it was this past year. It was right before COVID, and there was already an online component. And then certainly COVID made it pretty much 100% online. So what's going to be really interesting, though, is to see what changes are made, because we already know that companies are going to change. Doctors' offices are changing with telehealth. Utility companies are changing, allowing their customer service representatives to work from home. So what's going to be interesting is if that rule sticks.
Yes, it will be. And I take that back that the online programs were not accredited, because you kind of reminded me. So the programs could have an online element, but they could not be 100%
Got it.
online.
Got it. I got it.
To be accredited by is it the American Bar Association, the ABA?
The ABA, correct. The ABA.
Okay.
Yeah, and the thing about the legal profession is we are slow to change. So even if COVID is going to have an effect, we may not see that for several years, unfortunately. But everything is always in its proper timing. So I'm still going to say it's going to be interesting to see. Would you ever consider taking law classes in person?
I would. The only problem with that is eventually we plan on moving to South Dakota, and there are no in-person classes anywhere near where we'll be living. There's one law program in the entire state, and it's about 6 hours away from where we plan on living.
Wow. Yeah, I hear you. That's a little bit of an obstacle. Yeah. Well, I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that some changes will be made in a timely fashion.
Yes, please do. And if you hear of anything or if you happen to hear of any updates, please let me know. I'm not sure if any of my listeners would be like having the same interests, but I know there are a lot of like really motivated career parents out there. So maybe there are others.
Yeah, I'm sure there are. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So, the first thing that I really wanted to get into about you and about your background is your book. Tell us about your book.
Oh, my book. I love my book. It's my pet project. So I wrote a short novel called Adopting Tiger. And for me, it's very neat for a lot of reasons. One of which is I didn't go to school to learn how to write creatively. But I knew I had a message I wanted to communicate because, I go around and I give presentations and talks to different foster care parents and foster care agencies. And I see that some of the same questions are asked, one, and some of the same myths are held, right? So I'm thinking, okay, how can I create a platform to just communicate a uniform message? And really, I see it as a book that's an advocate for the child. So how do I show that adult issues kind of break children? Right? Because that's one of my mission statements, to show that broken systems and broken adults break children. So I decided to communicate this via a novel. So I cannot tell you how many classes I took to try to learn how to do a character arc, a plot arc, all that kind of stuff. And then just sort of my prayer was that, listen, I just don't want my writing to get in the way of the message, right? So that was always my goal. But the book is about two families attempting to adopt the same foster child, and the child's name is Tiger. That's why the book is called Adopting Tiger. And the first family is his foster placement at that time, and that is a professional football player and his wife and two children. The other family is a biological aunt whom he had never met. And so the book takes you through the twists and the turns, and we ultimately get to see who gets to adopt Tiger. But all the while, Tiger's voice is not necessarily heard, although he does have some behavior issues, and so he speaks that way. And so it's a short book. It can be read in one or two settings, quite frankly. And many states are allowing the book to be read for alternate training hours for like CASA workers and foster care parents and things of that nature. So yeah, it's Adopting Tiger, and actually can be found on Amazon or anywhere books are sold. And my pen name is Chavis Fisher, for the author's name.
Oh, wow. That is so cool. So I'm having trouble like kind of holding myself back from wanting to ask you like what the ending is, but don't tell me.
I'm not. I'll just say you'll be shocked when you see the ending. That's what I'll say. When you read the ending, you will be shocked. And it's the first part of a 3-part series, and I'm working on the second part as well. And so, yeah.
That is so cool. Well, Amazon has like a revolving door to my house, so that's definitely going to be next on the list.
Mine too. Yes, good. Very good. Well, you'll have to tell me what you think of the book once you get the chance to read it.
Yeah, the other thing I would like to do, and I haven't really thought through this yet, it was just kind of an idea that I had right now as we were speaking. We should do a giveaway of the book, or maybe even a couple copies. Sometimes we do giveaways on like Instagram Live or something like that. So whenever we're finished recording, we should talk through how we can do that.
For sure. I am here for that. Let's do that.
Cool.
Yes.
Okay. So in addition to your book, I heard a rumor that there's also a documentary.
Yeah. So sort of the same purpose, in that I wanted to sort of bring a call to action and just really sort of show that this is what I did is I wanted to make the foster care system itself the main character, as opposed to just sort of one story. And we sort of thread this story exploring what the system is all about. So I'm interviewing, a grandmother who, because of her daughter's opioid addiction, ended up having to adopt her 2-year-old granddaughter. There's a drug rehab specialist in the docuseries. There's a judge, another lawyer, some mental health professionals that talk about complex PTSD. I mean, you sort of name it. And, and then the Colts GM, Chris Ballard, and his wife, who adopted their 2 cousins out of the foster care system, are there. There's a couple talking about disproportionality. And so after each person is interviewed, or sometime during the interview, I ask them what their call to action is. And so there's many different calls to action, but it just comes from all these different perspectives. And so, my goal is that each one of us sees ourselves somewhere in one of these interviews, or certainly somebody we know, because my theory is we are all affected by foster care some kind of way. whether it's our neighbor's child that's a foster child, or whether we ourselves were once in the foster system, informally or formally, whether we're an educator, a mentor, someone at church, what have you. And so I just want to show that there's something all of us can do. One, we can just bring awareness. And then two, we can do simple things. You can be licensed to become a foster parent, but you don't have to do that. You can become a mentor. And if, you don't have the time to do that, you don't have to do that. You can smile at a broken child. We all can do that. And so, so I just, the way I look at both the documentary and the book, I sort of see it as an aspirin. We take an aspirin, and for one person, it's going to go maybe to the headache. Another person's going to go to a shoulder ache or a hip ache. It's going to hit us all differently, but I just try to make these experiences very well rounded so that everyone can be touched.
Wow. So cool. So interesting. When you were talking about your book, you mentioned that you wanted to incorporate answering questions that you were commonly hearing or dispelling myths. So a two-part question. Can you talk about some of those common questions and common myths that you've experienced?
Yes, I think some of the common myths is that, foster children are just damaged children. And what that translates to, at least to me, is that there's no healing. There's no opportunity for healing, right? Damage is damage. Whereas I just see that there are wounds, and the wounds vary. Not every case is severe, right? So some cases that, I've got a case right now where I did an adoption about 5 or 6 years ago, and the young lady let me know just about a couple of weeks ago that she graduated early from high school at the age of 17.
Wow.
And received so many scholarship offers that she can't use them all.
My goodness.
Yeah. So that's sort of a myth buster, just those sorts of things. So I just try to, there are very horrible stories and very horrible effects, truly. The other thing is sometimes people underestimate the number of homes foster children end up being placed in and how it's a re-traumatization each time. So I think, and then sometimes they look at behavior and don't necessarily know how to filter the behavior through, trauma. This is trauma.
Yeah. And in addition to different types of wounds and varying levels of wounds, I feel like there also are differing levels of resiliency.
Oh, yeah. I agree with you. I would say this, foster children are some of the most resilient children I have had the pleasure of coming in contact with. And not only are they incredibly resilient, but very accepting of differences and things that are different. Right. And tend to, in my experience, many have a heightened appreciation for things that we take for granted.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a little bit off topic, but I lately have been getting quite a few emails talking about second chance adoptions. And I know a lot of people really don't like that term or don't like what those are called. And I'm sure you're familiar, but for my listeners who are not, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't have a whole lot of experience here, but what happens is a child is adopted either domestically or non-domestically. And for whatever reason, the child and the adoptive family don't mesh. They decide that it's not working out. It's not best for the child, for that child to remain in their home, and they seek another family to adopt that child. I'm wondering, do you have any experience in like a second time adoption? And if so, have you ever seen this work successfully?
Yeah, the times I have. And the times that I have seen it work successfully is when it's been a family member. So I've had a number of cases where the grandmother adopted the child and the grandmother then predeceases the child, right?
Okay,
so,
yeah.
Yeah, and then so maybe the child is able to be adopted by an auntie or an adoptive auntie that, he or she got to know by, just by very nature of being in the grandmother's home. So I've seen that happen. I have seen some cases, and it is difficult, where, a foster parent did not necessarily know all that would be involved in caring for a child or this particular child, and go ahead and seek out either another person to adopt or voluntarily giving up their parental rights and turning the child over to social service.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, it's one of those things that you don't really think about or you may not know exists unless you're immersed and involved in the world of foster care and adoption.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's very, very true. You just don't know. And the laws in many states make it difficult because, once you adopt it, that's why I try and sort of consult with my clients ahead of time and say, this is a real permanent decision. This is not guardianship or custody. Custody is a little bit easy to change. A guardianship is easy to dissolve. This is actually parental rights. And there are two persons who rights were terminated so that you could have this. So it's kind of difficult. So just, make sure as best you can, just make sure this is a situation you think you can be in for the long haul. So I think because of that, it's important to really, really think about that, before an adoption is finalized.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely so permanent. One of the things that really surprised me when we adopted our son is they sent us a birth certificate with our names on it. Like we birthed this child.
Oh my
It's an
gosh.
official legal birth certificate. And I didn't know we were going to get this. And it showed up in the mail and I'm like, "Oh my goodness, my name is on his birth certificate. This is so weird."
Yeah, that's right. Your name replaces the biological parents' names. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can even switch the social security number or request a new social security number. You certainly can, let the social security office know that you are now the parent and link, them up with your benefits. There's all sorts of stuff that's really permanent. So yeah, that's kind of cool to get that birth certificate. And you can change the name. I don't know if you guys changed your child's name, but there's, all kind of permanent, great things can happen.
Yeah, we, regarding changing his name, so our adoption, we self-matched basically with the birth mother. We had intended to adopt him from the day we found out she was pregnant. Basically, she kind of seeked us out and asked us and never wavered. She never changed her mind. It was always in her brain that this was our baby in her belly. And so she let us name him from the beginning with his first name. And then I don't even know, maybe he didn't even have a middle name until after he was adopted. But of course, we chose his middle name. And then he had her last name up until when we adopted him. And then when we adopted him, of course, we changed it. So I don't know if that's standard.
Well, every case is different, but to have that relationship with the biological mom, I think is special. Very, very special. And then you made a good point. I listened to the caveat when you said, fortunately, she didn't change her mind. We have a lot of parents that unfortunately go through that, right? They think everything is, going to be is a go. And then, for understandable reasons, a mother or father may change their mind. So you had a very special experience, I'll say.
Yes, I feel very fortunate that we had the experience we did and the relationship that we do with his birth mother. And this has been really weighing on me a lot recently. I don't know if it's because I became made aware of situations where this was happening, but I have learned and met many people in the past couple months who have been chosen as an adoptive family and then the birth mother has changed her mind, sometimes deciding to parent and other times deciding to choose another adoptive family. I'm assuming you've probably seen that too.
I have. And it's heart-wrenching. And sometimes there's no indication that this may happen. And, you just have to, walk, with your clients through it, basically,
Yeah. Well, and I know too, sometimes this can happen even after the adoptive family has, I don't know the correct term, like spent a lot of money or put up a lot of money or provided a lot of money. Do any protections exist that you know of?
Yeah. So at the end of the day, it's her right to give up, right? So at the end of the day, she gets to do that. And so because of that, she gets a certain amount of time to even change her mind, even if she signs a consent. And there's sort of nothing that can change that part. A lot of times, I recommend that, all parties go to counseling to try and beforehand to try and together, bio family and adoptive family, to try to navigate through any potential red flags. But sometimes that doesn't help. And just to the biological parent's defense, I mean, she may not know until she births that baby, that she's connected. So it's just tough. It's just really tough.
Yes. And that makes a lot of sense to me, allowing the birth parent or the birth mother to change her mind even
Mm-hmm.
after the child is born. But I will tell you too, and maybe there's no way to differentiate, what about if a birth mother intends to basically scam or change her mind the entire time? What if she
Mm.
never intends? She's just doing it for money. Does that happen too?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it does. And she still has that fundamental right. That becomes an ethical issue.
Mm-hmm.
That's just not what you do to human beings. And that's what, but there's no, well, and every state has a different law. So I'll say that it's really, really important to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that point is brought out. But on the whole, she gets that right to not, there's nothing that will force her to give that baby up, and sign a document. She still has the right.
Yeah. Yep. And understandably so. That makes sense. I wish there was a way to get the best outcome in all situations,
Oh,
and of course there's
yeah.
no 100% surefire right answer every time.
There's not, but I think that counseling ahead of time helps sort of hedge some of the risk, because you can lay things out on the table. You can assess whether there's, someone's a little squeamish, and then kind of what it would look like. And that's not to say, I've not seen this, but that's not to say that a parent couldn't put in a contract that if such and such doesn't happen, we get a certain amount refunded. That's not to say, it's going to depend on each state's law.
Oh,
But yeah, that's not to say something like that couldn't happen. I do focus more on adoptions. And unfortunately, I've seen for the adoptions, I focus more on foster care adoptions, but for the adoptions where the foster care system is not involved, more of my cases than not end up in the situation you're describing. And so that's disheartening.
wait.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're saying that more often than not, the birth parent does change her mind, even after matching with an adoptive family?
I'll just say in the limited amount, so the majority of my cases are the foster care adoptions, but in the limited
Uh-huh.
amount of cases that I've had, I've unfortunately been on that side. But I would say the sample is not big enough
I
to
see.
be able to deduce an average or a probability.
Okay.
I'll just say that I've seen that enough to break my heart.
Yes. Okay. So, and then also just to make sure that I understand, did you say that maybe before the birth of a child, let's say a birth mother and adoptive family has matched, like self-matched or whatever, and the adoptive family could draw up a contract that says, hey, we're going to provide you this much money before and or after the birth for these approved things, but should you change your mind, we get all of our money back. Did you say that's a possibility?
That is a possibility, and that would be exactly what I would draft.
Wow. I didn't even know that was because that seems like the best solution. Of course, the adoption is the plan. If birth mother happens to change her mind, of course she is definitely allowed that right. But at least at
Yes.
that point, the adoptive family isn't out maybe tens of thousands of dollars.
Correct. Now, collecting is going to be a whole nother issue, but the principle is definitely there.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah. So you've got that whole component.
That's very
And then every
interesting.
state, yeah, and every state has different laws surrounding it. But yeah, because it's a business contract at the end of the day. It's a contract.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't even know that was a possibility or that could be an option. Would you guess that maybe some states wouldn't allow contracts of that type? Or do you think maybe they all would allow them? Or do you know?
I don't know, but most states, just have general similarities, but they're not head on similar. Some states are pro family, some states are pro biological mom, and some are pro adoptive mom, so it's definitely going to vary, but I'm uncertain.
Wow. That is very, very, very interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, switching gears just a little bit, I also wanted to tell you too, and this is kind of, well, not related really to the adoption world at all, but more to foster care. I was very surprised to know we spoke with our foster daughter's social worker last night, and she told me that when she tried to make her like bi-weekly appointments with foster families, sometimes they were very unwelcoming of her.
Oh,
Yes, and I was so surprised.
wow. So this is before placement within the families, or?
This is like our foster daughter's caseworker, who has to visit with us every 2 weeks, just to put eyes on her and check in on us to make sure she's doing okay. And she says for the other families that she goes to, there are some that are very unwelcoming. They don't want to attend appointments with her. They don't want her to visit their home. And I'm just thinking, if you're a foster parent, like this is what you signed up for.
That's right. That's right. We can't be talking about this is invasive. This is exactly what you've signed up for. And checks have to be made. Checks and balances have to occur. It doesn't surprise me. I've done a little CASA work. And I have been welcomed in not so friendly terms, as I sort of enter the space. I know it's just different. It's very, very different. And I can think of some of my specific cases. And, I don't know if there, at least for these cases, I don't know if there was a sense of entitlement. Like I got this. And, we are eating dinner now or we're doing such and such and we're just not interested. I'm taking care of a child I don't have to take care of. That was kind of the sense I got, at least from a couple of cases where I didn't feel welcomed. Another time it was with family members who didn't want the child in the quote unquote system anyway. So the system was the enemy, Yeah. So, but we see everything. Then we see, foster parents who are just so welcoming and, they have dinner ready for the case manager, and it's just, it could be a really nice experience. That's one of the things I do love about this work though. I've been doing it exactly 20 years. Last June, I guess, this will be 21 this June. But anywho, I've not seen one case that is exactly like another case.
Really?
Not one. I mean, there are general things, but there's always some nuance that's different that, sort of keeps you on your toes.
Wow, that is very interesting. So for your adoption through foster care cases, are those always paid by agencies or states, or are there ever instances where foster families pay for those adoptions?
Yeah, so foster families certainly can. So, and every state sort of executes this differently. However, there's something called NRAE, and that stands for non-recurring adoption expenses. And that is part of the Title IV program. So that's part of the federal government. And what that is that takes care of up to $1,500 per child of non-recurring adoption expenses when a child is a ward of the state and is eligible for the subsidy. But what you find happening is, the question of what eligibility looks like. That's where it differs between states and even between counties, to be honest with you. The other thing is the execution can be different, not only determining eligibility, but for instance, I know in Indiana, if an adoption is not completed, the social services will not pay for that adoption, even if the child qualified. So then it has to come out of the foster care parent's pocket. So you'll see situations like that, or you'll see a situation where an adoption didn't start off contested and it becomes contested. And then, so that could run you $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 potentially in terms of, depositions, trial prep, a couple hearings, trial, all that kind of stuff. And so there again, that NRAE is just up to $1,500 per child. So sometimes in those instances, if the foster parent wants to stay in the fight or stay in the contest, the adoption contest, they'll have to come out of pocket for what's not paid by the Department of Child Services.
Oh, okay. So I haven't run across the term contested, I guess, in this realm. I'm not really familiar with it. So let's say in an instance where biological family rights have been terminated, could somebody else contest the adoption?
Oh, yeah. So like, for instance, the first case that came to mind when you asked that question is a case I did not too terribly long ago where the maternal grandmother wanted to adopt and the paternal grandmother wanted to adopt. So they both filed an adoption petition, and then we had to sort of fight it out in court. So that adoption became contested. The child was with the paternal grandmother, which was my client. So it was the other grandmother that contested our adoption.
Oh, okay. I mean, essentially, could any person contest an adoption? Let's say the Walmart greeter doesn't think I'm a good parent. Could they contest our adoption?
They cannot do that, but they can make an anonymous call to social services. They could do that, but you have to have standing, right? So you have to, and in every state there is different, but you have to have a standing in court. So for instance, in this case, the grandparents will always have standing because that's a biological relationship. But in addition to that, at one point in time, the child had lived in both homes, right? So they get
Okay.
standing. Sometimes you'll see a former foster parent, the child probably never should have been removed from the foster parent's home, and they went to another foster parent's home, or they went to a biological family's home, and that foster parent's like, okay, fine, but I'm going to file a contest. Sometimes we do a contest when social services doesn't consent to the adoption. So we may have to state and allege that they are withdrawing their consent or they're withholding their consent unreasonably. And so that becomes a contest. But those are typical ways that an adoption can be contested. But it's typically not the biological parents contesting the adoption. They may contest the termination of their rights, right? But once their rights are terminated, they don't have standing to contest anything because they've got no legal tie to the child.
Okay, yes, that makes sense. Okay, so let's say in the same instance where the biological parents have terminated rights, could basically anybody in the world then file I don't know if this is the right terminology, but file the petition to adopt that child?
Well, yeah, I mean, theoretically, absolutely. So I just thought of another case where it was a safe haven case where a child was left at the fire station. And the child was on the news. And so that just really, piqued the heart of a lot of, people who didn't even know the child. And so a couple people went and filed an adoption petition. They didn't know the child. Now, we eventually got that dismissed because the Department of Child Services placed the child in a foster home. And so we were able to get that dismissed. But the point is, anyone can file a petition, whether or not they'll win that. I mean, I could file a petition, but it could be a frivolous petition. You know what I mean? So whether it has bite is a whole nother question.
Okay. I saw a TikTok video the other day and it was explaining is it called a safe baby box? The boxes? I feel weird saying it that way.
I'm not sure about the boxes. Tell me about the boxes.
Well, it was really interesting. It was a woman just kind of showing how they worked, and she showed like how you opened it and you placed the baby inside, and then there was like a bag that the person dropping off the baby would take, and I guess it had like resources for counseling whatever else. And I was just kind of wondering like how many safe haven drop-off locations exist, because can't you drop off safe haven babies at like at hospitals and fire stations too?
Yep. Police stations, fire stations, hospitals, states are adding more locations, as we speak. Yeah, but for every one of your listeners, it'd be important if someone wanted to, utilize the Safe Haven baby law to Google Safe Haven in their respective states. So, Safe Haven, Arizona, Safe Haven, Ohio, you name it. And you can find out exactly where those locations are and what is considered approved by the state.
I'm just curious, and I'm sure it may be very difficult to find this answer, but I'm curious how many safe haven babies have been dropped off in the United States. And then I'm also wondering, okay, so what happens if biological mother drops off her baby, let's say, at a police station, and then 4 days later changes her mind?
Yeah, she's got a legal battle to deal with, right? Because she's protected under the Safe Haven baby law. So there's going to be no repercussions, but typically, when a child is dropped off, the rights still have to be terminated, but you just don't have to go and find the parent based upon the law. But let's just say she kind of just makes herself known. She still has to be contended with. There may be a subsequent, abuse and neglect charge filed against her, and she may be okay with that. So that just gets to be a very intricate web depending upon, the circumstances. But I think, if she were to choose a safe haven spot as opposed to, the trash bin or, how many babies do we know are found in, the trash bins or the gas station, she's got a better chance at maybe maneuvering through the system in a way that may potentially allow her to be reunified with the child.
Okay. Do you happen to know the age limit for safe babies?
It is different in each state, but it's typically for newborn babies. And so it's going to be different for each state. But, what I've seen is typically under a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like my mother could not drop off her 32-year-old daughter.
Well, she might be able to, depends on where she's dropping her off. If she's dropping you off in a nice island in the Bahamas somewhere,
Oh, I'll take it.
I'll take it too. I'll join you.
A safe haven adult vacation. I'm on
That's
board for
right.
that.
I'm on board
That's
for that
funny.
too.
So another thing that I learned about you is that you've received a Congressional Angel in Adoption Award. That sounds very, very important. Please tell me about that. I have got to know.
Well, it was just amazing. So the senator from my home state nominated me just based upon, the work I've been doing. And, I went up to, to a selection committee and just basically got accepted. And, we went to D.C. for a weekend and had a couple of events, a big reception, I think at the Ritz, and a big award ceremony and a lot of really nice speeches. And, I think at that point in time, our keynote was I can't think of her name right now, but Sandra Bullock played her in The Blind Side.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think she was our keynote, and we just got to be around other people that were winning the award from other states, and just break bread basically, and just think about why we're in this, and just sort of be honored. So it's a huge honor. I mean, I love every time I put my pen on, I just get excited all over again.
That is so cool. And I've said this in other episodes that I try to not learn a whole lot about my guests before I talk to them. And after I saw that, and after, you're kind of telling me about this, I really would love to research, the other people who have received this and like kind of what they're doing in the world of adoption. It's really cool. And I'm like, so glad you're introducing this to me. I can't wait to learn more about it.
Oh, well, thank you. And yeah, there's, it's a vast array of people. So it is going to be interesting once you do that research.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
I meant to ask you this earlier when we were talking about the foster care adoption things. So are we allowed as adoptive parents to give gifts to our adoption attorneys or our social workers or that kind of thing? And I'm sorry, I should have asked this earlier, but it just popped into my head now.
Yeah. So typically, yes. So, but if it's a social worker or an employee of the state, they have a value minimum that cannot be surpassed for any gift given by anybody. So sometimes because of that, or just because of them, having some anxiety or some fear, they may not accept gifts, but some do. But there is a value limit.
Does it vary by state, or do you?
Yes, it would vary by state. And then, but when it comes to your attorneys or people who are not employed by a government, you can give them as many gifts as you'd like.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Interesting. Because I know when we went through our adoption, there were very strict I say rules, and then my attorney that we used, I believe she corrected me and said, no, laws that state like what we can and cannot provide to the birth mother. So I didn't know if that applied here as well.
Yeah, no, that would make sense. Yeah, that would make sense. So it's a little different when it comes to sort of the state employees and your private attorneys or your private service providers. Sometimes people will give a therapist who made a huge difference, a gift or something of that nature. And so there's no laws there.
Okay. Well, we are coming up on about 45 minutes, but it went so fast.
It went so fast. How amazing.
Really did.
Yeah.
Before we sign off, is there anything that I missed? Is there anything that you'd like to spread the word or tell to foster, adoptive parents, listeners, parents, anybody out there?
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly. So one thing is I have a foster care online apparel and novelty store, and I am giving a 15% discount to your podcast listeners. And the discount is Braided 2021, and the store is Foster Wear by Chavis Fisher. And maybe I can send you a link, and if you want to link it to the notes in the podcast.
Yes. Yeah. Tell me what kind of things you have in your shop.
Oh, so there's coffee mugs, T-shirts, hats, cell phone cases, book bags, sweatshirts, all kind of just really, really cool stuff. A lot of masks, a lot of vibrant colors, and just a lot of just fun stuff.
Oh my goodness. I can't wait. Thank you so much for the discount. You said the code is braided 2021. Does it matter if it's capitalized or spaces?
You know what? I would go ahead and make it capitalized.
Okay.
And then I've made it active for 90 days.
Yay. Okay. Thank you. I can't wait to check it out. I'll post the link on the podcast description, and then we'll also do the link on social media, Facebook and Instagram. I'm so excited. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my absolute pleasure. It's all about just bringing more awareness, and it's kind of fun to wear clothes. I also have like Adoption Rocks. I love my Adoption Rock sweatshirts. I've got a bright green one that I wear all the time, so it's just kind of fun. So my pleasure.
My goodness. I can't wait. I have no like pieces of clothing or items in my house that are like just specific to foster care and adoption. So I am so pumped to check this out.
Very nice. Very nice. So and then the last thing is the documentary can be obtained through Vimeo. That's Vimeo through Vimeo. You can just Google it, or maybe we can do the link. Yes. But a lot of states will allow the documentary to count for alternate training hours as well.
That is amazing. I know I have a Vimeo app on my smart TV.
Oh, nice.
Yes. So I think it should probably be pretty easy for people to find that documentary. But same thing. We'll link that up in the podcast description and on social media. So if listeners would like to contact you after the episode airs, how can they get in touch?
I'd say a couple of ways. One, my website, which is www.chavisfisher.com. The CHAV like Victor, IS like Sam, then Fisher, FISHER. And the other is Facebook and Instagram, and the handle is Chavis Fisher.
Oh my goodness. Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much. And something else just popped in my head, and I just have to tell you too. So as you were saying your last name, Chavis Fisher, before our son Brooks was born, we were really into hockey. We were into the Nashville Predators hockey team, and one of the best players on the team was Fisher. He's married to Carrie Underwood.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And so we were such big fans, and we were trying to choose a name for Brooks. And so I told my husband, Joel, that if the Predators were to win the Stanley Cup that year, we were going to name Brooks Fisher. And I thought that name was so cute. I loved it. And then they didn't win the Stanley Cup.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
But I love Brooks, though. I'm thinking, Brooks. I think Brooks won out.
Yeah, it did. And I don't know. Fisher is just such a cute name. I love it. But, if he doesn't play for the Predators any longer, but maybe if they win the Stanley Cup, and maybe somehow if we have another little boy in our home that we're able to name, it's maybe going to be Fisher. If it's all right, if it all falls into place.
That's right. I love it. And it is a nice name. It's a beautiful name for a first name and last name.
I think so too. All right. Well, thank you so much. I wanted to give also a thank you to our podcast editor, Ruben Andrews. As always, Ruben, you are such a lifesaver. And again, Natalie, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Alex.
All right. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon.
Alrighty. Bye-bye.